Good evening, members and members of the gallery. We might get started. It's just on 5:30. If you could all please stand for the local government prayer and acknowledgements. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of our beautiful lands and our surrounding waters, the Ramangeri and the Ngarrindjeri people, and we pay respects to their elders past and present. As a community, we recognise and respect their cultural connection with the lands and waters.
Almighty God, we ask that you bless this council and allow it to be an agent of change to the people of this city and beyond. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the honour of your name and the welfare of the people whom it serves. Amen.
We gratefully acknowledge the men and women of the Navy, Army and Air Force who made the supreme sacrifice in the preservation of Australia's freedom and democracy. We also proclaim our gratitude to those who returned to us.
Thank you. Please be seated. As I said, welcome everybody, and those in the gallery, and also those that are listening from home on our streaming services, and elected members. I'd like to, before we start, just take this opportunity, given that this is the last council meeting of the term, to thank all the elected members very much for the contribution that they have made over the last 4 years, and also to thank very much the staff for all of the assistance that they have given us over the last 4 years. It's been a privilege to work with you all, and I'm sure you would say the same in terms of the staff assistance that you have received as well. We have one apology this evening, and that is Councillor Glasbrook. We don't have any items adjourned or lying on the table, so we go to item 5.1, which are minutes of the previous meeting of the 26th of September. The recommendation is that those minutes be confirmed as true and accurate. If someone would like to move that way. Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Seconded that. Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Do either of you want to speak to them? Does anybody want to speak to them? All those in favour? That's carried, thank you. We have two deputations. The first deputation request was from Mr. Blatchford, which I refused, and he was advised of this by email on Tuesday the 28th of October. The reason that his deputation was refused, and I'll read to you what we gave him. With reference to the Council's Code of Practice for Meeting Procedures, Section 11, I'm refusing your request as the matter that which you wish to address relates to the Crozier Hill development, and on the 11th of March 2020 you were advised in writing that your questioning and continual allegations in relation to the Crozier Hill development against Council and against Council staff will no longer be tolerated. In accordance with Council's unreasonable complaint and conduct management policy, any further correspondence and or communication from you in relation to the Crozier Hill development will not be responded to. I expect that any questions from the gallery presented by you that relate to the same matters as already considered will be disallowed as per provisions of the Code of Practice for Meeting Procedures. Subject matter already answered. I do ask that you cease from sending any further correspondence to Council on this matter. If you believe that you have the right to do so, you should direct any further allegations or complaints to other authorities who will no doubt decide for themselves whether or not they will investigate. Despite our consistent requests for you to discontinue with your ongoing accusations and allegations against Council and Council staff, you have continued to do so, and therefore that request for deputation was refused on those grounds. I do have another request for a deputation, and that is from the Sea Squadron, Victor Harbour Galway Sea Rescue Squadron, and I think Clive Mounsford, who's a squadron leader, if you'd like to come up, Clive, to talk to the councillors. Thank you very much for distributing this letter previously. You have 10 minutes to talk to councillors, which includes any questions they may have. And what we'll do is we'll go straight to item 10.3 afterwards, which is the item that you're talking to. so that you don't have to wait around in the gallery if you prefer to go home. So please go ahead. Thank you, Councillor Kemp, for doing that.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Jenkins and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss this issue with you, because it's very important to us. As you're aware, Victor Harbor Bulwer Sea Rescue Squadron is a very active and respected part of the South Australian Volunteer Marine Rescue Organisation. We're regularly called to work with other agencies, Coast Guard, Surf Life, SES, SAPOL, other VMRs, Volunteer Marine Rescue Organisations. And occasionally helicopter, fixed wing aircraft and the rescue jet aircraft. Work with a lot of people. It's been demonstrated from time to time that when different agencies come together, their different training regimes and communications technology can cause serious inefficiencies, and in the past it's proven to have caused deaths. So to enhance our training and our abilities to work with other agencies, Police Water Ops conduct a series of realistic multi-agency training exercises each year. We attend one each year, but every second year we get to host it. This does not only test our on-water abilities, but our ability to provide an effective mobile communications base. We have a van that's got radios in it, and it has to be put somewhere where it's going to be able to communicate with the boats. This year, back on coming Saturday, we're hosting assets from Volunteer Marine Rescue West Beach, Warina, Kangaroo Island, Police Water Operations, Surf Life Saving, and I believe we will have fixed wing aircraft and a rescue helicopter down here as well. So it will be a really good test for us and a good training exercise. The exercise is overseen by South Australian Police Water Operations. We'll begin at 8 o'clock briefing at Bluff Ramp on Saturday. We expect it to be completed around 1 o'clock. It depends whether we can find what they've put out there for us. And then we're hosting a lunch at and a debrief at our beach headquarters. We're expecting 12 boats, obviously with trailers, at least 6 support vehicles, it could be more, and more than 50 personnel will descend on the bluff at about 8 o'clock, prior to 8 o'clock on Saturday morning. Although this exercise has specifically been planned to be outside our crayfish and major fishing season, because we all know it gets pandemonium down there during that time, if the ramp area is busy and the weather doesn't look too bad, we may have difficulties providing adequate parking for this number of vehicles. If this should occur and we're forced to use the overflow parking at Jagger Road, apart from being pretty embarrassing for us, for people who have to wander up the road and back, and it'd be embarrassing for the community, it will reflect on the community. It would have a considerable lead time to the exercise, which would impact on planned activities, particularly with the airborne assets, because they are on limited time, come down for a short period. Originally, we sent a letter to cordon off the 18 northern Bluff Ramp parks for the duration of the exercise, but the exercise has changed a little since then. And the mobile control base that we expected to be there will be up on a hill somewhere. And most of the support vehicles will also follow that up onto the hill. And we've got a few less vessels coming, so we will require fewer parking spaces. So although the parks at the ramp itself would be more convenient for us, because we've got some fairly long trailers involved, what we have, the vehicles and support vehicles and boats and trucks and trailers, will fit into the western boat parking bays in front of Whalers Restaurant. This would be less inconvenient for local boaties, and these parks at present are not designated trailer parks. They're only designated during main season. So this would potentially cause less angst from the boating community. So, and we are also very appreciative of the advance notice message on the council boat ramp camera page. It has been noticed, and thank you very much for doing it. So that's about all I've got to say. Questions, please.
Thank you. Are there any questions from any of the members? No, I think you had a really good explanation in your deputation. So what we might do is, if there are no questions, we'll move on to item 10.3 and make a couple of decisions around your use of the Bluff boat ramp.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the first recommendation is that council on 10.3 we're at, which is on page 47 of your agenda. The first recommendation is that council receive and note the SAREX exercise, the Bluff boat ramp report. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Robertson. And thank you, Councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to that? No. Does anybody want to speak to receiving and noting the report? All those in favour? That's carried, thank you. Sure. Karen has just said that on the basis of client's reputation, she may need to amend the second recommendation slightly, in that, do you want to perhaps use the microphone?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, we have a recommendation that Council approve the request to secure allocated parking spaces at the Bluff boat ramp for the exercise, and that Council assists with cordoning off allocated parking spaces during business hours on Friday as part of that. But I'm wondering if we might need to be more specific, given your suggestion, Clive, that the parks out the front of Whalers at the west section, and perhaps fewer than the 18 might be required. So perhaps we might say in line with the deputation or details of the deputation. Jodie's got another suggestion. Yeah, okay. 14 car parks in front of Whalers restaurant. We could just add that into the
recommendation doesn't state how many car parks, so there's probably no need to put a number there. You can do what you need.
My only thinking is the details in the report and the original request. It references the original request from Sea Squadron, so I just think it might make it a little clearer that it's not the ones that are in the agenda report itself.
Okay. So if you'd like to put to secure 14 allocated parking spaces rather than leave that blank. Okay. Thank you. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And seconding that, Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to that? No. Does anybody want to speak to that? No. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you.
I have a question, if I may.
You wouldn't normally have a question after the deputation, but with the leave of the meeting, are you happy for the... Yes? If you'd like to ask a question very briefly.
My question just relates to cordoning off the area and uncordoning it, if you like, later. Take that.
Through the Mayor, part 2.2 of that says the Victor Harbour School Sea Rescue, the Sea Rescue Squadron is responsible for clearing the parking restrictions following the completion of the exercise, as we don't have staff working at that time.
Thank you, but the council will cordon it off on Friday. Thank you, we will do that. Thank
Thank
you
you
very
very much and best of luck for your exercise. I look forward to joining you. We now move to questions from the gallery. And we have some questions from the gallery from Peter Charles. Take a seat, Mr. Charles. Your first question is in relation to Crozier Hill, and questions in relation to Crozier Hill by Mr. Blatchford won't be answered because they've already been the subject of extensive consideration, investigation and response. The continued agitation of the same or similar issues by anyone else, including members of the public and elected members, should arguably receive the same treatment. This is especially so if the continued agitation of the same or similar issues by persons other than Mr. Blatchford is calculated to frustrate the intent of the application of the unreasonable complainant conduct management procedure, which has been applied in relation to Mr. Blatchford. So I'm refusing your first question, Mr. Charles. You have 3 other questions. The meeting procedures are very clear that you can have 2 questions and a follow-up question. So if you would like to ask another question with your other questions, that's fine.
Thank you, Mayor. Should arguably. It's interesting phraseology. Yes, the other questions are, on the 26th of September 2022, Council Administration advised details of the contamination polycycloaromatic hydrocarbon benzene or benzopyrene at 64 Ocean Street, Victor Harbour. That response, Council Administration advised that the total of 1,600 or 1,600 tonnes of contaminated soil was removed and taken to the EPA licensed landfill site at Lonsdale. Could the Mayor please ask Council Administration to also confirm the amount of backfill soil that was delivered to replace the contaminated soil, and if the soil was compacted after delivery, and what was the waiting period to allow this fill to properly settle before any construction was allowed on top of the site? Part of that, right, you go ahead first.
I'll answer that. The contaminated material was waste, derived fill that was removed from the site as it couldn't be reused on site, and was required to be replaced with specified materials needed to backfill trenches, structural components of the roads, footpaths, or engineered soil or garden beds. The amount of specified backfill materials needed is unknown. These various materials were compacted in accordance with the individual specification of those individual requirements, and there was no requirement to allow for additional consolidation.
Thank you. I think you've answered all the questions in one. It wasn't that difficult, but I would wonder whether maybe you've got your quantity of 1,600 tonnes incorrect. Would that be a typo somewhere along the line? 1,600 tonne? 1,600 tonne removed
sure that
and replaced?
The answer that I gave you didn't refer to any tonnage.
No, it was probably a trick question by me right now. I don't know, but I did mention here, advised that a total of 1,600 tonnes.
Sorry, Mr. Charles, please don't ask trick questions.
Well, it wasn't really a trick question.
We just said it was a trick question.
Well,
this
transparency and openness is really what's important when we get to these sort of situations, and I really do hope we have it in the future. Thank you very much for dodging the question.
There are no other questions from the gallery, so we move on to item 9, Office of the Chief Executive, the outstanding resolutions list for October 2022. The recommendation is that Council receive and note the report. Would someone like to move that way, please? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Do either of you want to speak to the report? No. Councillor Kemp? No. Does anybody have any questions in relation to the report? No. All those in favour of receiving it? Those against? I just actually have a question that's not on the report but does relate to an outstanding resolution. And I wonder whether or not either Jody or Karen might be able to answer it. There was a motion about 6 months ago to find out the costs and the modelling of hard rubbish collection that I think I made and was carried by the Chamber for FRAWA to look at that because the community have been asking about hard rubbish. Can you tell me where that is up to and when we'll find out the costs and the different models associated with hard rubbish collection? Karen, thank you.
Thank you for your question. My understanding is that FRAWA have actually included that in their business plan for 22-23, and it hasn't yet been completed, but it is due to be completed, that work, this financial year.
Okay, so that's something that the new council will be looking at in relation to hard rubbish collection? Yes,
and FRAWA will provide information back to council once they've undertaken that exercise.
Right. Thank you very much for that. We now move on to 9.2, which is the Local Government Association Annual General Meeting, which is this Friday. The first recommendation is that council receive and note the Annual General Meeting report. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Robertson. And seconded by? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Does anybody want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Councillor Schofield?
Yes, I'd like, well, that's loud, declare a perceived conflict of interest as I sit on the Landscape Board.
Sorry, Councillor Schofield, is that for receiving and noting the report or is that for the second recommendation?
For the recommendation, I'll move back, on 7.1.
Yeah, no, so we're just up to recommendation 1, receiving and noting the report. If you've got a perceived conflict of interest, you might want to raise it before we do recommendation 2.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add to receiving and noting the report? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? Recommendation 2. Before I look at recommendation 2, is there any, are you happy to do all of those reports together, or is there any that you want to take out and look at separately?
Do them all together.
Do them all together? I'm happy to do that. So you have a perceived conflict of interest in relation to that, Councillor Schofield?
I do.
Can you tell me how you're going to deal with that?
I'll stay in the chamber, enter any discussion and vote on the issue.
Thank you. Would someone like to move recommendation 2? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, Councillor Henderson. Thank you, and Councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to recommendation 2? Does anybody want to speak to recommendation 2? Thank you, Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Item 7.3, energy positive carbon neutral development from the City of Victor Harbor, talks about an amendment to the 2016 plan and code. We're voting on this to go ahead. We haven't seen the amendment as to what documentation is going to be part of this process. So do we have any documentation as to what we are going to be supporting to go into the amendment to the code?
That is 7.3, did you say? I didn't
yes.
Just have a look at 7. It's sorry, Jodie's speaking to that. Yeah, it's looking for an amendment. It doesn't. You're quite right. It doesn't say what the amendment is, but I'm just trying to find it on.
It's asking for the changes to be made to enable councils.
Well, it's not. It's 19. Yeah, yeah. So it's on page 18 and 19 of the agenda, and you're quite right, it doesn't say what the amendment is, but it's asking the LGA to write to the expert panel on planning to seek an amendment to the planning. It'll be up to the expert panel to decide what the amendment is. If this doesn't get up, then the LGA wouldn't do that work and wouldn't ask for any changes to the planning laws in relation to that. So it's not specifying, it's quite high level, it's actually not specifying what that amendment would be at that stage. That would be something that would be worked out between the LGA and the expert panel on planning and the Minister for Planning.
If we're making an amendment,
We're not making an amendment. We're requesting the LGA to write to the Minister so that the Minister can make an amendment.
do we not provide what our thoughts are about the amendment, what we'd like to see in it to say as to that? Because when you look at the building code and all that, you know, housing has now got to reach 5-star, 6-star issues around, CO2 emissions and safety aspect. The building code, I think, covers it quite well, you know, because he's been building on this for a long time, you know, to have energy rated housing and buildings and that. So I think it's just, to me, we're just not quite sure we're doubling up on something which has already been done. So unless there's something the council can identify in the building code which doesn't cover it, I'd like to know that. That's available to while we're doing this. Is anything being identified in the building code to identify that the code doesn't meet this requirement?
This, I'll ask Graham to speak to it, but council's already voted for this to go to the local government associations. That's already been through council once. What we're doing now is having a look at the whole thing, but Graham can speak to that specific issue for you, David.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, through the Mayor, it's an interesting one because council actually, this council has put this recommendation, and now the LGA is seeking feedback from all councils, including this council, about all the recommendations, and now council speaking into the recommendation that it's already made. So it's just a bit of an interesting circumstance. Just to clarify, it's around the Planning and Design Code, not the Building Code of Australia. So the Planning and Design Code looks at the zoning and the policy provisions under the zoning, whereas the Building Code looks at the very technical detail about how a building is built. So, and you're quite correct, Councillor Kemp, the provisions within the Building Code are quite good in terms of specification treatment for houses, residential dwellings primarily. It probably isn't as comprehensive when it comes to other classifications of buildings, commercial buildings and the like, but that's the Building Code. The Planning and Design Code will look at orientation, the way land divisions are designed, the way developments are more broadly designed to take into account opportunities for sustainability and for energy efficiency development to then take place further as that planning progresses. So, and it's not specific as to what the changes are. At the time, I think Councillor Robertson put this proposal to this council, but I think the last line of the description probably nails the intent of it, which is that it seeks to amend the Planning and Design Code to enable more energy efficient and sustainable development. It includes water provision, it includes all of those things that aren't covered in the Building Code as well.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Paphouse. I guess I'm just a little bit concerned about this designing process, what goes through, that we don't want to make it unaffordable for people to build. If all these design codes change that much to include so much design in towards energy efficiencies, that will come in time, I think, as we move forward. But thank you for your explanation.
Are there any more questions or queries or debate in relation to recommendation 2? If not, I will put it to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We come to 9.3, the discretionary rate application from the Christian Fellowship Centre. And the first recommendation is that Council receive and note the discretionary rate rebate application report. Thank you, Councillor Hales.
Mayor Jenkins, I'm not moving that. I'm declaring a material conflict of interest for this item, as I'm a member of the committee of the Christian Friendship Centre Incorporated. So I'll be leaving the chamber due to it being material in nature.
Thank you. Would someone like to move the first recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Robertson. And seconding that, Councillor Schofield. Would either of you like to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. The second recommendation is that council deny the discretionary 100% rebate pursuant to section 166 of the Local Government Act. Would someone like to move that second recommendation? Councillor Henderson? And seconding that, Councillor Robertson? Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Henderson?
I just want to say the application doesn't fit our relevant criteria for this sort of discretionary rebate, and that's why I'm moving that we deny this application.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Does anybody else want to speak to this? Councillor Robertson? No. Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I'm going to vote against this. I know the Christian Friendship Centre applied for 100% rebate. I think they're a non-profit organisation. They raise money, provide chaplaincy throughout the schools as part of the religious process within the schools, and I think for us not to support and help them in some ways, like we do other non-profit organisations, they're respected. We don't have to give 100%, we can give a 75 or 50%, at least give them something, but that's why I'm not supporting this. I think that in the context of it, I prefer not to support it on this grounds, and I'm actually thinking of moving a formal motion to adjourn this to the new council for January 2023.
In relation to that, Councillor Kemp, I note that on the bottom of page 26, it says, should council choose not to go with the recommendation of administration, the matter should be adjourned for the incoming council to consider, as the decision is to be considered to be a major policy decision because it goes against our policy, and because we're in caretaker mode, we probably shouldn't make any decisions against our policy, so that would probably occur. If there's no other debate about this, I actually
point of order.
Your point of order, Councillor.
I moved a formal motion. It has to be voted on.
I beg your pardon. I didn't realise that you said you were considering.
No, I said I was considering this item, but then I'll move a formal motion.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I didn't realise that you'd moved a motion.
Yeah, to be adjourned until January 23.
Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Robertson. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. It's adjourned until January 2023. Thank you very much. Would somebody like to see if Councillor Hales would like to come back in? Just for your information, Councillor Hales, that has been adjourned for the incoming council to consider. We now move to item 10.1, the 2022 Christmas decoration planning. I can do that on block if you'd like me to do that on block. Are people happy for that? Would somebody like to move that on block? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. And do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Mann, thank you. Do either of you want to speak to that? You want to speak to it, Councillor Schofield?
Look, I will. I really think it's about time we had some decent decorations and that, and I think our community will be rather pleased to see this recommendation come through.
Thank you. And for information of council, I did ask the acting CEO to just check whether it was all right for us to make this decision, given that we are in caretaker mode, and given that the funds have already been allocated. It's a decision that we are able to make if you so wish to make it at all. Councillor Mann, did you want to speak to this at all? No, does it? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, thank you. This one here, I support it, but I'm just wondering, Corey, has that got feedback? I'm just wondering, out of this, I didn't see how this was going to be, excuse me, I didn't see how this was going to be implemented.
I can ask the CEO how that would be implemented if you'd like to know.
For instance, is this going to be just down Coral and Ocean Streets, or is it going to extend elsewhere? And we're going to, you know, make these decorations and then hand them out to people to put up, or what's happening?
Through the Mayor, it's been deliberately left a little open, and that's because we're not sure how far those funds will extend. And so depending on the type of Christmas decorations that we're able to produce for this purpose, and how far that will go will depend on specifically where they'll be placed. Graham can add to that.
Thank you, through the Mayor. And in the manner in which that will be done is outlined under the second paragraph of the page 42 under the proposal, the heading "the proposal," where it says that a local artist to be engaged to design a suite of decorations that are easy to install, located in high-profile locations, intended within the CBD, of course, and can be reused in future years. So that's the essential intent.
Can I ask you, is Rotary involved this year in terms of the Christmas tree or Christmas decorations? Not sure.
Yeah, they are going to.
They are going to. Oh.
Put a tree, decorated tree. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Are there any further? Is there any further discussion, Councillor Kemp?
I have a few questions to start with. In the past, when decorations were put up by council staff in the street to businesses, they were charged a service fee. Is that correct? To put the decorations up and down, and will this apply again if these decorations go up in front of businesses?
Through the Mayor, no, it's not intended that we would charge a service fee, and we didn't. I don't think we previously charged a service fee. There was a scheme where businesses would buy into some of the decoration suites that were available, and as part of doing that, I think council for those businesses that had them and bought them, this is quite some years ago now, they would hold on to them and sort of come, you know, December the 1st the following year or late November, could even be in October these days, but council would have engaged a person to come around and actually set up all the baubles and wreaths and everything else that went up with it.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's just that I was informed that businesses paid a fee for them to be installed and taken down. Okay, I received your answer. Thank you for that.
Sorry, just to clarify, there's been a combination of things that have happened over the years. There might have been an element of that, but it's certainly nothing that's happened all that recently.
My other questions is that, do we have enough time for design to be done and fabrication, and then looking at how far it will extend? I mean, is it better not to have decorations to a certain degree, or compared to having half a street done, because that's how far the money goes? And of course, in the costings of that, the putting up of those decorations in the street, is that going to be costed as part of the cost is going to be included in those funds? Or who is putting it up? Is it a contractor or is it council staff, and will it be charged back against this job line?
Yeah, through the Mayor, we would anticipate that it would all be covered by that job line. So if there's a cost to put them up, that would be covered by the job line as well. In terms of the number of decorations and how far that will go, that will really depend on going through the process to understand that better once we get the feedback from an artist to do that. I think it would be safe to say it's not going to cover a lot of decorations. It's not going to be extensively and heavily decorated throughout the town centre. The intent would be to take the dollar value of it as far as we possibly can and push it as far as we can. But it would also be necessary to provide something that's sustainable that can be used the following year as well. So we wouldn't necessarily want to sacrifice quality over quantity either, because the intent is to try to continue to use those in subsequent years, and hopefully with the blessing of council through its budget next year, supplement with that some more money next year so that we can build on the inventory of decorations that we have.
Thank you for that. I'm sort of in two minds whether I support this or not. I'm not against the decorations and the designs and all that. I just think that we're running out of time. We've only got 6 or 7 weeks before Christmas. And with the festival decoration grants program, we've only had 1 applicant. So it shows to me the community's not interested in this. For us to go ahead and to actually look at putting up decorations, and they may be the best decorations ever designed and put up, but if we only go to do a certain part of the main street, it'd be more embarrassing to council and to the community having a piecework approach, a patchwork quilt approach, than having nothing at all and allowing the standard Christmas decorations that we put out before, about bin liners and various things like that, just to keep it standard until we actually can do something along those lines. Because of the timelines involved, I'm not quite sure if we will achieve it. So I'm sort of in two minds whether I support this or not.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Hales.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. My question kind of comes off the back of Councillor Kemp's, but it's when would the likely timeline for such decorations being up be? Given that the festive season, as Director Padhouse kind of alluded, has somewhat begun. Christmas pageant in Adelaide's 19 days away. December's less than 40 days away. How long do we envisage this process taking? Because I think somewhat of what Councillor Kemp's saying in regards of you don't want to go through an overly complicated process in getting these very highly customised, possibly very unique and beautiful Christmas decorations done, but they're up for a week before Christmas and then they go away again, and we bought one Christmas decoration with $14,000. That type of community narrative going on. So, first question is, when are we likely to see Christmas decorations out of this?
Through the Mayor, I'm not sure of the exact answer, and I suppose a part of this approach is to test the market to see what it can provide and the time frame that can provide it in. But I'd agree that if it's not successful, one of the measures of success would be the ability to actually get them completed and up in a timely fashion. So I think when we go out and call these, it'll be a case of can we deliver by, for argument's sake, the 1st of December in terms of having these up in time. And we can do that.
I have another follow-up question, if I may, Mayor Jenkins.
Yes, if you've got a question.
Thank you. I'm just wondering why we're going down the art of employing an artist to design something, compared that, you can buy a lot of the commercial style of decorations off the shelf, which are quite good, which are used around a lot of places. So why are we going down this path, which to me seems more expensive than just a commercial product we can purchase?
Through the Mayor, good question. I suggest it's because the desire is to have something uniquely Victor Harbor, and that's not just off the shelf, but a little bit more bespoke that perhaps speaks to a little bit more about Victor Harbor, incorporates it with perhaps the branding and things like that.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Yeah.
You've already spoken. Have you got a question?
A question. Yeah, and it's not directly to deal with this, but the
This needs
will
to
the
be related to the motion at hand.
decorations? It's about decorations. So will the art piece in the main street, stage 4, be up by Christmas time?
I'm reliably informed that it'll be the 17th of November that we're expecting it to be up by, perhaps the 18th.
Okay.
Is there any further debate or any further questions on this? Councillor Schofield, did you want to close the debate?
Thank you. Look, I asked the elected members to support this. If we look back at last Christmas, our main street was a really sorry sight. Council wore quite a lot of criticism for not having some sort of decorations around. 6 weeks isn't a long time for somebody that shows initiative and has the skills to actually design and put some pieces together. And in my travels, I did see last year in Victoria some very interesting Christmas decorations that were very inexpensive to actually do and could be used for many years to come. So I please ask you, as one of the last things that you debate in this chamber, to support our community and give them something to remember a good Christmas by.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. That closes the debate. All those in favour? Those against? The division, please. All those. Councillor Mann? Councillor Robertson? Councillor Hales? Councillor Schofield and Councillor Henderson? And against, Councillor Kemp. We now move, that is carried. We now move on to item 10.2, the Main Street Precinct opening event. And if you would like me to do that on block, I'm happy to do that on block. I'll leave it up to the chamber. Are you happy on block? Councillor Hales?
Assuming there's no objection to it being moved on block, I'm happy to move that way. But I will move a slightly altered recommendation 2, just simply putting the words "that also serves as an opening to the festive season for our community" on the end of it.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. That sounds lovely. Nice. Would somebody like to second that? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Hales?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. We all know that a lot of hard work has gone into getting the Main Street upgrade, etc., to this point, and all praise to the staff, contractors, etc., working on it. It's been fabulous, and it is fabulous once again to be heading into another street party. The last one was an awesome event that the community absolutely loved. Likewise with the one before that. As we are planning this event for the 2nd of December, we're looking at things like having the artisan markets coincide with it, and it being, I guess, a larger scale event for our community. I think that it's an incredible opportunity for us to trial a Christmas party, market festival kind of idea, the sorts of which Harndorf hosts. We know how much effort and the incredible energy that's gone in from the council side and from our partners, especially the traders in the Main Street, as well as the funding partners, have put into getting this done, and that's a huge success for us. But our community also has the opportunity, with us looking at an event like this, to look towards the future and look towards a sustained, ongoing annual event for our community that celebrates the launch of the festive season. Festive season being very intentional wording. We all like summer and the festivities of family and the like over the Christmas period, even if we don't celebrate Christmas ourselves. So simply putting that as we go into this event, we look at it with that intention around how could this event be leveraged into something more. And in future years, absolutely you could move it alongside things like the Christmas pageant or the like, but it's also just saying Christmas has come to Victor Harbour, holiday season's begun, it's the 2nd of December, let's go. So yeah, happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Councillor Henderson, did you want to speak to it?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just want to say congratulations to the staff and the contractors for getting the Main Street project to where it is today. I'm very, very pleased that this chamber decided to make the decision to move, go ahead straight away with this project in one go. There was a proposal to do it in two parts and have the main street disrupted, the businesses particularly disrupted twice. The majority in this chamber, and I think it was a majority, I don't think it was unanimous, but the majority moved to go straight ahead with this, and it's proven to be the right decision. And it's very pleasing to see that it's got to where it is today.
Does anybody else want to speak to this? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think this is a good proposal, and I like what Councillor Hales has talked about in terms of making it something bigger, marquee event to starting gun for the start of the festive season. So, yeah.
Thank you. Are there any more comments, Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, no, I agree. I think just the amount of work that's gone into the main street from our partners and also council staff and administration. I think it's excellent to celebrate it, but I think it's also I appreciate. I think Councillor Hale's idea of having this Christmas street party kind of event shows not just to the community that here's this great infrastructure, but we're showing them this is exactly how it can be used off the bat. And I think that works well with now that we're going to have Christmas decorations to go up around the place as well. So yeah, I'm very happy to support this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hales, do you want to close the debate? There wasn't a lot of debate on that because I think everybody agreed with the recommendation, but would you like to close?
It's wonderful that everyone is in agreement. It's a good note to come towards conclusion on. I think this is just about showing our community how they can activate and use this space as well. It's not just about, look, we built something. It's, look, this is why we built something. We built it because it can be a space that community can come into and use and enjoy time and space together. So yeah, I definitely hope everyone supports it.
That closes the debate and I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? Unanimously carried. Thank you very much. And I think picking up on some of those ideas, the staff, thank you very much, and Jodie, your team, especially for all of the work that you've put in. And I can remember the debate around the table when we did look at whether or not we do this in stages or whether we do it all at once. And I think that the council staff and administration and outside ideas need to be congratulated for the work that they've done throughout winter to get it to the stage where it is now. We'll be able to have outdoor dining during summer. The celebrations and the Christmas feel will really be able to be celebrated in this wonderful new space. So thank you very much, and I think Councillor Hales is quite correct in terms of, you know, if this is one of the last things that we debate in this council term, it's a really positive thing to finish up on because there's been a lot of work in the chamber and outside of the chamber to enable this, and the community are really going to benefit from it. So, so well done to Jodie's team and all of the staff that have been involved. If you can pass that on, Karen and Jodie. We now come to the item 13.1, the minutes of council committee meetings, and we just have the Disability Access and Inclusion Advisory meeting. Moving that way, Councillor Henderson recommendation, and seconding that. Thank you, Councillor Hales. So Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to those minutes? Anyone want to speak to those minutes? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. The subsidiary and representative reports, item 14. The recommendation is to receive and note them. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Hales. And seconded, Councillor Kemp. Do either of you want to speak to them? Does anybody want to speak to them? No? All those in favour? That's carried unanimously, thank you. The Fleurieu Waste Authority annual report. The recommendation is to receive and note that. Would you like to move that way? Councillor Kemp, you're on the Waste Authority board, aren't you? No, you're not. Karen is. Sorry.
You have a crystal ball maybe next term.
Next term maybe. Would somebody like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Hales. And would somebody like to second that? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Either of you want to speak to that report? Does anybody want to speak to the annual report? No, in that case I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's unanimously passed. Thank you. We now have the Fleurieu Regional Aquatic Centre Audit and Risk Management Committee. This is where I was thinking of you, Councillor Kemp. And if we can do that on block, if people don't mind. Are you happy to move it on block, Councillor Kemp? And seconding Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? No, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. The Fleurieu Regional Aquatic Centre Authority Annual Report and Financial Statements. Would someone like to move that recommendation? Councillor Kemp. And seconding that, Councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Just to give an overview that it gives you an idea how the aquatic centre is travelling coming post-COVID. Did have a major impact on the centre and the wellbeing of our community by not using it. With the new board in place and a new member on there now, Vicky Thomason, I think we have Andrew Collins is the new executive officer. So I think with some stability within the board structure and administration, I think you'll see a different report next year, which will certainly highlight a growth and moving forward in the right direction.
That's great. I note that the operating deficit this year is less than it was last year, so that's a good step forward, and well done to the board for the work that they do. Does anybody else want to speak to this? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? The mayoral report for October. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Seconded by Councillor Henderson. Does anybody want to speak to the mayoral report? All those in favour? The elected members report. Would someone like to move that way? Seconded for that. Councillor Schofield, thank you. Does anybody want to speak to that elected members report? No. In that case, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. There are no matters of urgency. There are no questions on notice. Are there any questions without notice? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I have two. Could the administration provide any truth to that the handover of the goods shed will be on the 30th of November to council for fitting out and moving and training up volunteers? If so, it's sort of it's a bit embarrassing when it comes from the community. The elected members are not aware of it, or I'm not aware of it as an elected member, that this will take place on the 30th of November. Is there any truth to that?
Jodie, can you answer that?
Thank you, through the Mayor. That's the date we're working towards. We haven't confirmed that yet, so we haven't provided that advice to the elected members.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jodie, but information of it sort of indicates that 30th of November is the handover day through some.
That's the date that we're working towards with the contractors we have. There's other things in play though. So.
Thank you for that. Every elected member received a letter from a residence, two pensioners and one with severe disability received a huge parking fine. I'm just wondering if the administration received any response from the two people involved in some form of waiver on this parking fine. If so, is there any feedback you can give or consider it? Because I'm just wondering if you do make a decision on the request from the two people who received this parking fine, that would the elected members be updated since we received that letter about the parking fine?
Through the Mayor, I'd have to look back over that correspondence. It's not springing to mind. We deal with a number of expiations and expiation appeals. Happy to close the loop with members. As you're aware, there are quite strict protocols around how those reviews can be undertaken, but I'm happy to advise you of an outcome.
Councillor Robertson, you had a couple of questions without notice.
Yeah, and I have 4 of them there. I have 4 of them. First one relates to the what I call the old TOC H land, which is now in the process of being sold by the owner, who was the organisation that took over from TOC H Spotlight or something. I forgot what they're called. I wrote a note to the council about this, and what's my questions to the acting CEO. Have we done any follow-up at all on the with the owner of this block of land? I think it's being sold by Elders. It's a bush block, 2 bush blocks that are below the old TOC H camp there.
We thought that that question might come up, Councillor Robertson. There's been a discussion with Ben Coventry, who advised us that the PDI Act and the Planning Code does not have any influence over the sale of the land, stopping or delaying a land sale. As part of the Section 7 search, or the Form 1, that the current zoning and relevant overlays are identified for potential purchases, which will include the native vegetation that is on that land, and the state significant native vegetation areas overlay. These 2 overlays would result in a trigger for applications from the developer to be referred to the Native Vegetation Council for vegetation clearance and or land division applications. But this would only occur once a development application is lodged. So I understand that Mr Coventry had a meeting with representatives from Open Light a while back and raised the concern about the native vegetation and potential development on the allotment, and he did suggest that consultation should occur with the Native Vegetation Council due to the intact native vegetation and potential limitations of the development of the site. However, they followed that advice. Until a development application is actually lodged with council, there's not much from a council perspective that can be done other than advise any potential purchasers that to contact council to discuss the land about the nation and associated overlays, and suggest that a clearance may be an issue and that they should consult with the Native Vegetation Council. However, there has not been any inquiries that have come to council as yet.
That's fine. The issue, though, is that the current owner, this Spotlight or whatever they're called, they are intending to close expressions of interest for these bush blocks. I think it's within the next week or so. So my question to the CEO was that could there be, and because of where we stand at present in relation to the council not being able to make any financial decisions in caretaker mode, that but this bush block has got a lot of benefits to us as a council because of it being one of the last remaining remnant bush blocks buried in Victor Harbour, and would make a wonderful addition to our parks and reserves. So my question, the question that I wrote was really, could this acting CEO contact either the agents, that's Elders, or the owner, to see if there was a way of making sure that the council had an opportunity to discuss the purchase of that land with the owner, because they're going out to sell it, and the expressions of interest close in another week. And that, of course, is highly inconvenient for if we are to have the opportunity to be able to purchase that block of land, those blocks of land.
Through the Mayor, it wouldn't be our regular practice for me, off the back of one question from a single elected member, to approach a property owner about expressing an interest in purchasing it. There are, of course, we're in caretaker, so there are some considerations around the kinds of decisions that council could make. At best, a resolution of council that I seek to explore it with no financial commitment would be the only way I could see that would be possible. I get many suggestions and questions from elected members, and of course it's only the power comes from council being the full elected body. That would be the best way to proceed.
That's what I had intended to do tonight, was to put a motion forward that that we.
Councillor Robertson, have you got another question? We're on questions.
Yes, but I don't know that I've explored that fully.
You
might think so. Are you going to object to me following that through on the basis?
This is not a debate. This is not a time for debate. It's a time for questions without notice. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask your questions, but this isn't a debating time.
Okay, so my question to the acting CEO is that is it appropriate for us in caretaker mode for us to ask you tonight to engage with the owner and see what the possibility is for delaying the date of the expression of interest?
I'm just going to see if Kelly has anything further she wants to add, but I would suggest that any resolution of council regarding that would need to be non-binding in any financial way, because the caretaker provisions are largely about this council not committing a future council to anything at the 11th hour. I don't know if Kelly wants to add anything further to that. I think the key there is it couldn't be any kind of binding decision. It could be simply asking a question of that the council asks me to make that inquiry would be probably the most suitable way. Kelly, you're looking at me. Do you want to answer further? No.
If I may, through the Mayor, just to add to that, it's probably a difficult conversation to have when there's no commitment of council to go further to ask someone to delay a sale.
Have you any further questions, Councillor Robertson?
Yes, I do. Mr. Mike Willett, who is our town crier for the present time, his agreement with the council expires in December. Is there any intent on behalf of the administration that this that his agreement will not be extended?
Thank you for the question. Through the Mayor, we've communicated on various occasions with Mr. Willett, explaining that we would need to wait for caretaker to end for us to put up a proposal if it was also seeking sponsorship, because the inquiries Mr. Willett's made with us have been two-pronged. Firstly, about extending the term, and we've committed that we would be happy to put a report to council to extend his term as town crier, but that if it was to be bound up in a sponsorship request, then that couldn't be done during caretaker. So we haven't received, to my knowledge, a response from Mr. Willett to say that he wants to proceed with the extension of his term as town crier separately from the request for sponsorship. So as such, I haven't taken any further action there, with an intention to put the joint proposal to council, should that be Mr. Willett's desire after caretaker.
Yeah, I'm not aware whether about any sponsorship issues, but Mr. Willett made an application to have the...
Councillor Robertson, question, this is time for questions. If you've got another question, we're not getting into a debate.
I wasn't entering a debate, Mayor. I'm getting around to asking a question.
What is your question?
That the Mr. Willett made an application in writing to council 4 months ago to consider the extension of the agreement that he has. Is there any that would seem to be enough time to have given him a response by now?
Further to my previous answer, I'm waiting on a response from Mr. Willett as to whether he wants to proceed separately with the sponsorship proposal and the extension to his term as town crier. I haven't yet received a response, so I haven't taken that any further. Absolutely happy to, of course.
Third question was around the closure of Granite Island. This council resolved to close during the Schoolies Festival, to close Granite Island from I think it was 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and that was passed by the council. I understand that the Department of Environment has said they won't close the island until 10:30 at night. And so there was, my understanding, conversation with exchange with yourself that you would be following up with the Department of Environment about providing a closure of the island that was in line with the council's motion.
Thank you for your question. Through the Mayor, yes, so we, off the back of Council's resolution, approached Department for Environment and Water, seeking that the Granite Island be closed from 5 p.m. For the period of the schoolies. They've said they have no objections, but that it's actually DIT who would undertake that closure, so they would do the closure, the standard from 10:30. And so we've now made application to DIT to further Council's resolution, which sought a 5 p.m. closure, and we're still working through that with them. We're yet to receive their formal decision.
So in relation to the closure of the island, if Department of Environment isn't ready to provide security services at the same time as the island's closed, in other words 5 o'clock, instead of what they're proposing, which is 10:30 at night, my question would be, would the council be willing to fund the security service to be on the gates from the time of the closing at 5 o'clock? For 3 nights, that would be approximately $300 to $400.
Through the Mayor, I don't have a council resolution for that, and it's not part of our standard service offering. I don't know if other directors want to add to that response, but it wouldn't be our usual council role, and so I wouldn't generally do that without a resolution of the council to make sure that it has their support, as it does require some funding.
Yeah, and my last question is concerning the council's computer software implementation project. We were given assurances, this chamber, more than 3 months ago, that we would be receiving monthly updates on what was going on in that project, and also through the Friday members updates. It's been 3 months now, and we haven't had any reports coming through on what progress is being made. I'm sure there is some that's going to go in. So my first question in relation to that is, when can this council, not while this one is now about to expire, but when does the administration estimate that they'll be providing those monthly updates?
Through the Mayor. So the corporate systems implementation project is going very well. Thought I'd just let you know that. But you will recall that we've had several conversations as a council, largely around that risk management given our resource levels, where I explained to council members that I would only be doing our regular reporting and I wouldn't be doing project specific reporting based on the individual preferences of elected members. So I would do quarterly updates in line with the usual CEO performance review reporting. If those meetings are cancelled or not held, I'm happy to continue to provide quarterly reports at that higher level through to elected members, but not the regular monthly reports or quarterly reports through the council agenda, as it would just be a for information report and would be largely operational. And the elected member weekly update, again, those reports are time consuming. We're depleted in our staffing resources and it's not the best use of our staff time providing reporting at that level to council members when strategic level reporting is more appropriate.
So when would you expect to provide the first of these strategic level reporting?
At the time of the next CEO performance review agenda, where we provide that high level reporting on key projects to the committee, and then we share that with the council.
Any further questions, Councillor Robertson?
No.
Does anybody have any other questions without notice? No. There are no motions on notice. Are there any motions without notice? There are no. Councillor Kemp?
Yeah, I'd just like to further investigate the TOC-CH project with the bushland settings and take on advice of the acting CEO that we move the motion that we direct the acting CEO to investigate the registration of interest for those 2 blocks of land without financial committal, because we may, not understanding what the actual expression of interest is, it may not be a financial commitment straight up. It just might be just a touching base to find out who's interested in purchasing the land without no financial commitments. We don't know what the terms of reference are around that. So I think it's worthwhile for us if we direct the CEO to investigate the expression of interest on those 2 bush blocks of land with no financial commitment until the new council is formed in November.
No, that's a motion. Are you happy with that, Councillor Kemp? The way that reads?
Yes, basically that's all it is just a virtually putting the toe in the water to find out what is the expression of interest, what does it actually mean, and will it give opportunity for the council when the new council is formed in November. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So we're not making any financial commitments, we're just sort of finding out what the expression of interest entails.
I'll just ask Kelly to see whether or not that's appropriate during caretaker period.
Through the Mayor, as long as there's no financial commitment or requirement to provide some assurance that there may be a decision in that, then that recommendation or motion should be fine.
I'll speak to the motion just to clarify a little bit easier, because just off the top of the head. I think if the acting CEO or who she delegates to go and look at the expression of interest, I think if it comes back that there's got to be a commitment or anything like that, then that's a no-brainer and we don't do it. It's just finding out what that actually entails, the expression of interest, whether it gives us an opportunity or not when the new council's formed. So that's all it is. It's just putting the toe in the water and see if it's futuristically viable or not. If it's not, then we don't lose anything.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Robertson, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, Mayor, I think that there is considerable community interest in this issue because it's come up very suddenly. A lot of people are quite shocked that it's going ahead, and the treatment they've been getting out of it as well. And there would have been, I think, tonight, if it hadn't been quite so late, there would have made a request for a deputation to come along here tonight as well. There's a real keenness to make sure that this block of land just doesn't get flogged off by the current owner. The original piece of land was made as a bequest. Normally, those bequests are supposed to last forever. Sometimes they don't. So I think it would really pay for council to do everything we can. We're just caught in a very difficult time because of this caretaker mode and the restrictions that are there. But if we are seen not to be, interested in following up on this, I think if we were thinking about credentials in terms of biodiversity and that sort of thing, well, it would be that we're just, it's just a talk show. I think that it would be well worthwhile following up.
Okay. Thank you. And yes, I will allow that motion without notice, given that there isn't any financial commitment. I think given that the council has been looking at reducing its debt and reducing its borrowings, and that's been a very important part of what we're doing. If this had a financial commitment attached to it, especially at this point in time and at this point in the budget cycle, I wouldn't be allowing it as a motion without notice. But given that it's just asking about what's going on, if that's what you would like to happen, I'll put it to the floor. Does anybody else want to speak to it?
I apologise, I thought you wouldn't allow me to do my closing.
No. Anyone else want to speak to it? Councillor Schofield.
Thank you. Look, I understand the residents who have concern in relation to these blocks. I've had quite a few conversations with them. I guess in one way, yeah, look, let's go and have a look. But the other concerns that I have sitting with me is usually an expression of interest. If you're interested in purchasing something, it just heads straight into the cost. So what are you prepared to pay? And if they're closing their application shortly, they could have 7 or 8 people sitting there with offers. And so then council really can't do anything until the new council come into play. But I think in purchasing these 2 blocks, it's not going to be a cheap exercise. And with everyone wanting us to cut back on our spending, I think this is a decision that shouldn't be a 5-minute decision, and it's unfortunately the timing is not good. So I do have some concerns, but I will vote for it because I understand the importance of that piece of landscape and some of the native vegetation that is sitting there that is quite unique. But I don't really think that we're going to gain very much by this avenue. I think they should research and go back to when the land was actually given and just see where that sits in the court of law.
Councillor Henderson.
Excuse me. Yes, I agree with some of the things Councillor Schofield's just said. I think the issue is here that, firstly, the land we're talking about is possibly the only area within Victor Harbor, urban area, if you want to call it that has never been either cleared or grazed. So there are some very unique plants there, and these particular pieces of land have been looked after by a group called Scrub Savers for many years now, protecting the native species that are there and clearing away the threat of feral weeds. I think it's, I believe that council will be very limited in what council can do to save this bushland. But I think it's important to get the message out there to the community that this is bushland, native area of bushland, which needs to be protected from any sort of clearing or development, if at all possible. I don't think it does any harm to inquire as to how much interest there is there, but I think the take-home message here is that somebody, somehow, all of us, the community, need to save this bushland from development in whatever way we possibly can. So I will support this motion, and maybe it'll just start the conversation through the whole community.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Does anybody else want to speak to this? Councillor Kemp, do you want to close the debate?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Again, I see this as an opportunity, a strategic opportunity, and if it all ducks line up in a row and it all works well, I think that we could end up being in a position to actually look at saving a lovely piece of bushland and native vegetation. I do have a question to Mr. Pat House, if it's possible. Is this area zoned as rural or residential? There's 2 lots of bushland and native vegetation.
Through the Mayor, it's certainly zoned. What it's zoned as, I'm not sure off the top of my head. I would imagine it's for that area, it's likely to be rural living.
Right, so potentially it could be developed into housing blocks.
Councillor Kemp, I'm just reminding you that you're closing the debate,
Yes.
not opening up new avenues.
Yeah, I'm trying to close the debate through a couple of questions to actually argue the point as to why we should be pushing this forward and getting onto it. So that's fine. I think we'll just leave it at that moment. That I think the councillors who've spoke very well about reasons why we need to say this for our community. So I think this is an opportunity for us to take and see where it leads us. Thank you.
Thank you. That closes the debate. All those in favour? Those against? And I'll just, and while that has been carried, because there is a native vegetation overlay with state significant native vegetation areas, they will need to have an application referred to the Native Vegetation Council. So that will also be something that needs to be taken into consideration when the block's sold to whoever it's sold to, and if it is subdivided. Are there any other motions without notice? There are no confidential items. In that case, then at 5 to 7, I call a closure to this meeting. Thank you very much, everybody, for the last meeting. And if anyone would like to come and have a drink and a toast to 4 years of working together, please do so. And I might go down to the Hotel Victor and raise a glass.